And now we are going to start recording our first episode with the new camera. Lovely. Hello Internet, my name is Addison and this is the comic book Scramble. Today I'm going to be talking about the third issue in Grant Morrisons' run on Doom Patrol. Last time I talked about the second issue and we saw the introduction of the Scissormen and the city of Orquith. In this issue we're going to see what forces our characters to finally engage in confrontation with these characters, with the city of Orquith and the Scissormen, and first start to come together as a team. This issue took me a little while to kind of compile and figure out what I wanted to say about it, because it revolves around Buddhist. Well, there's a significant part of it that talks about Buddhist Koans, and I was doing research trying to figure out exactly what I wanted to say about that, and that's kind of a fool's errand. Really, the more and more I looked into it, but I didn't want to give up because there's not much can be said about them, and I'll explain more to that when we get to that part of the story. So this issue opens up in Kansas City, Missouri. And you can see there's just desolation everywhere. You have, looks like been rioting going through. There's just desolate, post-apocalyptic looking, and there's these bone spires spewing up everywhere. And the very first line of this issue is in Kansas City. Kansas City was a nightmare. That was another hard part of this, is the first half of this issue is all narrative sort of storytelling from Cliff, who's talking to the chief and the rest of the Doom Patrol after they've kind of collected together. So it's all kind of exposition. So as we turn from our first page, it opens up to a double page spread, and you kind of see the whole sort of street, and you get a bigger, wide view of the state of Kansas City at that point in time. And we see that the cutouts of the Scissormen have from the Scissormen cutting people out of reality and into unreality has more widespread and is throughout the city. We see people everywhere. I also noticed that on the left hand side of this we have some imagery of a couple images of eyes. I don't know if that's part of Orquith spilling through or what, but it doesn't seem to come up later in the issue at all. So I'm wondering if it's not something subtle, laying the groundwork for future issues, because the eye has such powerful symbolism throughout every culture, from the evil eye, the eye of Horus, the all-seeing eye, the top chakra here, can't remember what it's called off the top of my head, but in the pineal gland in the brain, and so it's powerful. So I wonder if that's not alluding to something else that'll be in further trades. I've read the first 2 trades now and it hasn't come up yet, but I wonder if it won't, or it could just be doodles. So the next 2 pages, once we turn the page, is series of panels just with narration over it, and it's about Jane and Cliff just trying to make it through Kansas City, avoiding Scissormen and the like. Eventually it says that Cliff says that it took them an hour and a half to find or to get to Union Station. And from what I can tell, it looks like that was the Doom Patrol's original headquarters. I haven't looked too much into it, but worth noting, one of the nicknames for Union Station when it was first being built was the Jackson County Insane Asylum, because it was such a huge undertaking at the time that people thought it was crazy to even try to build it, I guess. And so I thought that is a very fitting headquarters for the Doom Patrol. Following that, we get inside the Insane Asylum, and we see that the chief has left a note for Cliff and Jane giving the location of the new headquarters and where the rest of the Doom Patrol is so they can find them. At the same time, this is like when they have first confrontation, or not their first confrontation, but the first confrontation in this issue with the Scissormen. And as Cliff says in this, which is a pretty, I don't know, just kind of a badass line, is I couldn't think of one clever way to stop this guy, so I just trusted the mindless violence, which is just cool. And so from there, they make their way down into the basement and looking for a jet, the Doom Patrol jet. And this is where we see a new personality come out for Crazy Jane called Black Agnes, which is taken from English folklore, which is a character that used to live out in the woods and she would eat children. That is kind of a boogeyman situation. If kids got lost or anything, Black Agnes would eat them. And the significant thing about Black Agnes is that this is the first time that Cliff or us, the readers, have seen her personality physically transform her body as well, and she turns into blue skin with these giant claws and razor sharp teeth and red eyes. And Cliff, it startles Cliff so much he yells, "Oh my God!" And Black Agnes in turn says, like, "There is no God and I killed him." And there's also, and so I was wondering, I tried to see if there was any connection there to like Nietzsche and with the character of Black Agnes and the folklore or anything, but I couldn't find any solid connection. I was just reaching, I guess, maybe. So Black Agnes, she sees the Scissormen and she just goes and rips them to shreds instantly. And they just, as soon as they get cut to ribbons, there's no body, everything disappears except for kind of like the shreds of the uniform. And this Cliff says in this, he's like, and all I could keep thinking the whole time was like, "There's no blood, there's no blood," which first is interesting because I think it's like, this is because, it carries the idea that the Scissormen are just an idea, which we'll kind of get into later in the story, I guess. They'll explain that. They're just an idea, a concept made manifest. But I also thought it was interesting that Cliff himself is like so freaked out by them not having blood and that there's no blood anywhere, despite the violence that Black Agnes has thrown at them and shredded them, because Cliff doesn't have blood. And I wonder if that is a shade of his sort of own like self-loathing situation and how he's like kind of freaked out about himself and his own discomfort as to why he was so freaked out by these creatures not having blood when he doesn't have blood. So from there, then the next couple pages is just Cliff and Jane narrowly escaping the Doom Patrol headquarters, and then we get thrust into Rhode Island where the new headquarters is, and everyone's sitting around the table talking to the chief. And Crazy Jane is in the process, who's being her dominant personality at the time is Mama Pentecost, who is in the process of deciphering the black book from the end of the first issue, which is like, there's no letters or anything on it. It's a tactile, kind of like Braille, and it's written off of the not the Fibonacci sequence. It's written off the Feigenbaum sequence. It says the Feigenbaum sequence of imaginary numbers, which I couldn't find anything that actually is. There's the Feigenbaum series of constants, which is something math related. I did not do well in math. So we find out that the city of Orquith is created as part of a thought experiment by a group of philosophers, and it's all written down in this black book. And the philosophers, when they created the city of Orquith, they decided that they created it to exist on a plane of reality that intersects with our own. And they want it to be kind of a opposite to our world. Or if you watch Stranger Things, like the Underneath, it's the same kind of idea, sort of, similar. And the city grows by inserting little pieces of itself into other worlds and eventually just enveloping the world it is trying to get into. which is exactly what's happening to our world, or to the Doom Patrol's world. And then it goes on to talk about the Scissormen, and the Scissormen are part of like a religious sect, and describes it as sort of Orquist's answer to the Spanish Inquisition. It should also be noted that I keep forgetting to mention that you notice that the Scissormen, when they talk, they don't talk in a way that makes sense. And Grant Morrison mentioned in some interviews that I was watching that one of the ways that he was writing in this, it was sort of a Dadaist, which was early 1900s, like right after World War I, art movement that was anti-art, and they did a bunch of weird stuff. And one of the styles of stuff that they would do is write poetry, where they would cut up like newspaper clippings, all the individual words and everything, and then just mix them up in a bag or a hat or whatever, and they would pull them out one by one, and then place them in order, and that would create the poem to be creating art like that was without rules, kind of. And so I believe that's kind of what's going on with. I think that's part of the way Grant Morrison was writing those lines, was through that process. As Crazy Jane is explaining all this to the rest of the Doom Patrol, they start walking down a hallway, and it's revealed that they have actually captured one of the Scissormen, and like maybe torturing him. Like it doesn't say that they're torturing him, but if you look at him, he looks very torture-esque. And during this whole process and all these scenes right here, Cliff keeps asking, like, I don't understand, like, is this real or is this not real? And the chief tells him or says, like, you know, maybe this will explain it. And he's like, gives him a very famous koan, which is used by Buddhists, which you may have, like, I think probably the most famous one is the sound, like, two hands clapping makes a sound. What is the sound of one hand clapping? And it's sort of this like meditative technique, and or like proposition. Some Buddhist sects don't even like use that anymore because some people feel like it's not a good tool for. But the one that they give in the book is like, first there is a mountain, then there is no mountain, then there is a mountain. And these are actually like questions that leaders would give to lower level Buddhists. And so I was trying to explain the significance of that to this story. And so the first part of that I set out on was figure out what is a koan and what's its purpose and what do these things mean. And in relevance to the Doom Patrol here, it does have the direct correlation I could think of is this repeated theme of duality, which is common in koans, and that we as humans, we like to divide things into separate categories and everything. Either something is or it isn't. And this repeated idea of duality is something that we have seen already in the first other two issues displayed, and the kind of subversion of that duality throughout the Doom Patrol already. And I think that's furthermore kind of like another angle at which that concept is addressed in this series through the koan, and kind of explaining that, as the chief says here, that reality and unreality are not relevant in this. It doesn't matter if it's real or unreal, it just is. Now it's kind of with this the idea of koans is that the thing that was silly about me trying to figure out what to say about koans is that there's almost like something can't be said. a question, but a standard question is you get asked a question, you think about the information given, and you spit out a response. The point of koans is to be pre-thought, pre-thinking. And what that means exactly, I don't know. The only things I can relate it to is maybe the Taoists have it. One of the simple sayings the Taoists have, kind of a sister philosophy of Buddhism, is the way that can be spoken is not the real way. How it relates directly to this, I think it's just anyway. You get the idea. You understand where I got stuck, right? So after they kind of finished discussing the koan, the chief says that he's going to track down the philosophers that made the book, and while he's doing that, they need to keep an eye on the scissorman that they have in captivity. In the very first shift, it seems, is is Josh, Tempest, and Cliff. And so this is the first time we're seeing an interaction between Cliff and Josh. And they're talking about how Cliff thrives on the adventure of the Doom Patrol and the conflict. And Josh just can't handle it anymore. He's not about it, doesn't care to be a part of this Doom Patrol thing anymore. When suddenly they realize that the Scissorman has escaped. And all of a sudden there's a group of them in there. And so they fight him off, they just blast him and punch him. But one of the Scissormen gets the better of Josh, gets him a headlock, and slack, gets cut out of reality. And so Cliff's righteous indignation, Josh! And it's at this point that Revis, or everyone else comes rushing back into the room, and Cliff's like, they got him! And Revis says oh no, I can feel them, they're coming outside. And Cliff says, you know what, I'm going out there, we're getting Josh back. Doing his alpha leader sort of mentality. And Chief keeps saying no, we need to find out more about the book. He's like, nope, I'm getting Josh back. And so they go and the three of them all team up and they book it out the mountain. And we're ended in this issue with the koan. It's first there is a mountain, then there is no mountain, then there is. And you can see them kind of phasing back and forth between Orquith and the real world, eventually landing in Orquith. And that ends this issue. And so in the next issue, you can tell we're going to enter the actual city. It's actually the very end of this story arc, I believe. And we're finally confronted with the city of Orquith, and we'll get to see how they resolve that conflict and everything that happens there. And it's a pretty good issue, so I'll be sure to make that next episode in a timely manner. And I hope to see you then. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you thought of this issue, if you've read it, or the Doom Patrol, or call me ugly, anything you want. And I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.